Flamingers. So just a quick little plot synopsis of the movie if you want to know. Challengers is kind of a love triangle movie with it showcasing the past and future of this tennis match that is slowly built up as a much bigger deal throughout the movie through flashbacks. This movie has an extreme amount of sexual tension throughout, so be warned of that, I guess, but that's kind of all you need to know before going in. This review is going to be mostly spoiler free. If you want to go in completely blind, then skip this. Anyways, I'm gonna talk about stuff like the writing, or more specifically, the characters. Okay, so starting off with Zendaya's character, who kind of plays the main character. I mean, she's on the poster and stuff, but I feel like the three main leads get an equal amount of screen time. For a good chunk of the movie, she's just really controlling and manipulative, which makes sense. She kind of just does a lot of things in this movie at the start because she's bored or for some other strange reason. And it does feel very underwritten on the writer's part, but much later in the movie when they actually start focusing on her character, it would make sense that after all this time she would actually commit to a relationship. I mean, at this point in the movie, she has a kid, so it's pretty clear that she actually has matured and is being much more responsible. But throughout the movie, we kind of see her internal pain, which is pretty interesting, and a lot of what she does during this movie does showcase that she hasn't really changed at all. She's still pretty psychotic, but to be fair, all three characters in this movie are pretty unlikable and a little mentally unstable. Zendaya herself does a pretty amazing job though. There's just so much energy to the characters in this movie. Speaking of, I'm gonna cover the other two main leads. I'm talking about Patrick and Art in the same section because they're kind of similar, at least for the most part. There is so much gay tension between these two throughout the entire film, like the churro seed, goddamn, how did they get away with that? It's kind of incredible, I'm not gonna lie. They pretty much start the same at the start of the movie and feel practically the exact same, but later in the movie where we see how they ended up, they definitely feel very different from each other, which is kind of a positive and a negative thing. I think for Patrick it definitely works. He becomes so much more unlikable in the future. He's such an annoying prick throughout the movie, but it really works. He's just so unlikable, but I can't help but enjoy him. He's really fun whenever he's on screen. Art is kind of just boring though. He really just doesn't do a lot throughout the later non-past half of the movie. He's just not the most important or interesting character and is definitely my least favorite out of the three. He's just kind of boring. I do really like his relationship with the character Zendaya plays though. It's so aggressively toxic and horrible, and I really enjoy it in a kind of messed up way. This movie in general is just so toxic. Everyone hates each other in this film. Okay, so this film has this really interesting Christopher Nolan-esque type of storytelling in a non-linear fashion, which is really cool. So as I said in the plot synopsis, the main point of this movie is to focus on this tennis match between Art and Patrick, but throughout each minute or so of the match, we get flashbacks of the day prior to the match or 13 years ago with how they met Zendaya's character, and I really like this. It's a pretty cool idea and it all flows together very well to make a very well-paced film. As the film goes on, it builds much more on how important or unimportant this match is to Art and Patrick, since there actually is a lot on the line for both of them. The movie kind of opens with no point to the match, but as the match goes on and the movie progresses, you start to get much more invested in this match, which was a really cool detail. To add on to this point, much later in the film, there's a twist around the characters' motivations in the match, and it really makes you wonder who's actually going to win. I won't spoil it obviously, but it was a big high of the film for me. I have pretty mixed thoughts on how this movie presents itself. So I think this film is shown in a very nice, seamless way. I also think the editing is very sharp and slick for like the first half of the movie. The early tennis match scenes feel really slick and seamless, which is a pretty nice look for the first half of the film. As said before, as the film goes on, they need to keep showcasing the actual tennis match for a minute before going back to the flashbacks, and I think the best part of the film is how they actually decide to showcase this. In almost every cut back to the tennis match, they usually switch the style in some way. Like at the start, it's very slick but kind of generic, but later on we get a first-person shot of Patrick playing, and then in the final moments of the movie, we get a first-person shot of the ball going back and forth, and it's the most intense point in the movie, and it's honestly just an insane shot, and just makes that final action, well, not really action, but it feels like it, action scene really effective and pretty great, honestly. The ending for this movie is really great, but I won't spoil that since this video is mostly spoiler-free. This movie's really creative visual style is super well complemented by its music, which is great, but basically everyone has already said that. Yeah, I love the music, it's great, and works really well with the different styles this movie goes for. This movie also has a lot, and I mean a lot of flashbacks. Now, I get that it's needed for the movie to work, but Jesus Christ, are the transitions bad. I don't know how many more 10 years ago flashbacks I could take. Like, I get that we need flashbacks, but dude, do we really need the same blank years later text every single time? This must happen at least 30 times in the movie, and it's actually exhausting to deal with. This is kind of a nitpick point, but I really have a lot to say on this, so I'm gonna keep going. So as I said, this movie has a lot of creative ways it showcases repetitive moments, like how each scene of the tennis match is showcased in a different way, then why couldn't they just use a different and more creative way to cut back into the past? I mean, sometimes they don't use text to cut backwards, but it's pretty rare and far between. It's so unnecessary to have a 1 week later flashback to the tennis match. Like, I get it's in the past. You don't have to tell me this every single time. I can tell that it's 1 week later because, the actors and the characters look old. Like, I can tell when it's 13 years ago because they look way younger than they do now in present time. It just feels like such a waste of time, and it's seriously the worst part of this movie by a landslide. During the film, when they cut back to the tennis match, they never use the text, and it works fine. They just have them playing tennis before doing a hard cut back to the tennis match, and that just works perfectly. Just do that. Seriously, for a film this visually creative, could you have not come up with a single other way to cut to flashbacks without using the same blank years later text? So yeah, that was a real quick review on Challengers. It has some issues obviously, but I really liked it. I'm giving Challengers a high 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and this is an epic outro.